Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming by. We're going to do some interesting work with some markers, and we can basically consider this an ink and wash, but we don't always have to use, let's say, the traditional ink. We can use magic markers. I use Sharpies a lot, the Sharpie brand magic markers. They come in great varieties of sizes. And so we have, a fine point, a really large size. We have the medium, and probably everybody here is all familiar with these Sharpies. We find these in our offices and in school. Pretty much everyone uses them, so they're readily available. They're in all the any kind of hobby and craft store. They're in your local supermarkets. So these are really readily available. You can get these really pretty much any place. There's any kind of shopping with just standard items like food and so forth, and 5 and dime stores. They're pretty much readily available at all shopping locations. And then there's some more fancier ones. These are Statler's. Permanent waterproof ink, and they come in a variety of point sizes, so you can get very fine points with these, and then they have larger sizes as well. Faber-Castell makes the same style. Black artist pens, and they're waterproof and permanent. And this one's a little bit more larger point. And we can also use, this is a little different, so in a sense these are really all waterproof. And once you put them onto your watercolor paper and let them dry a few minutes, they're not going to smudge with watercolors and paints and so forth. So you'll have a good time with these. These are really fun. You can sketch out ideas with them, work out small compositions, and you can even use them in your finished paintings. They look great. You can also use these to enhance your ink and washes. So if you're going to use something like the Speedball Super Black ink, India ink, if you want to do ink and washes and you're going to use the traditional ink, and then you might be using this with a nice bamboo pen like this. So if you're going to use something similar to this with a small inkwell like that, with a little bit of ink in the bottom, and do some ink and wash with the more traditional approach. You can supplement once you're completed with maybe some of the traditional black ink that's waterproof. Then you can also go in and add and use some of these markers to maybe do a few final touches once you're completed with your painting, or even before you start adding any watercolor, you can also go in and do a little bit of touch-ups or add things that are more let's say more intricate with your finer pens. So let's say you wanted to do some fine grass in your ink and wash, and you couldn't get those fine markings with your ink and bamboo pen. You can always go in with a Sharpie, a fine point Sharpie, and do some more finer details like that. So these are just great tools for the watercolor artist to use. And if we're actually working on doing just a composition to get an idea, this here will be our composition. We're going to do a small barn, like this is a nice landscape painting and ink and wash, and we're going to do a barn in the countryside here, maybe a farmhouse barn type feel. You know, we can also go in and use just a regular standard office pencil and get some of the tonal values. Like, let's say the roof is going to be maybe like a red color or a blue color, more light, not as dark. And then we do the darker darks with our pen, our magic markers. So you can fill in some of your darker darks here. Let's say the sunlight's coming from this side of our painting. So we're getting some darker darks on this side of the tree. The sunlight's on the other side. So this is the shadow side of the tree over here. And there's bushes over here. And maybe some sunlight peeks through and cascades across and through here. So we see some sunlight on the ground over here. So this is all lit over here, sunlight. And then we have sunlight lit on this side of the barn. And then on this side of the barn, it's a little bit in shadow. So we know we're going to put some shadow over here. So we can work out some ideas, just a simple barn. The biggest hurdle we have to get over on a barn is just making sure our roof is the two lines of the roof, a gable roof, just a simple gable roof, which is just a gable roof like this in essence, but it's on an angle, or the building's on a little bit of an angle. So we just have to remember as we go that we have to make sure this line is the same exact angle as this other side. So that throws off. I've done this many times drawing roofs. It's sometimes challenging to remember to get that line the same. So you can sometimes do just a little quick helpful tip I use sometimes is you can always take a small piece of tape and just rest it on the first line here. And then you just, since the tape is perfectly parallel, you can get your second line just like that. And if it's good drafting tape, this is pro drafting tape. This is the best tape I've found online and in art stores. It peels up real easy and doesn't rip the paper, so your watercolor paper will stay perfect with no any peeling or anything like that. So pro drafting tape, great tape. And again, you can just, to get your angle, you rest your tape on the first line you draw, and then you draw your second line with your roof like that. And then that gives you your perfect line like that. And then you have a really pleasant, pleasing looking roof. And then you can put a little curve or sway to it or whatever, but for the most part, that's a key thing with doing roofs. Like that. And then you could also buy wider tapes. So if you have a larger size, or you could use 2 pieces of tape. So you can kind of use different things. I've used rulers before. You can use a ruler. You could take a ruler and just put it onto your paper if you draw one line. So if you draw a roof like that, you just rest your ruler on that first line there. And then you just slide it over like that. And that pretty much, if you slide it over carefully, just without moving it much, like that, that works too. All right, so we're just about to begin. I hope if you're new here, you'll subscribe. Consider subscribing. We do great videos every week, and we have lots of fun. We do everything watercolor. We also mix in some different ideas with inks and washes, and sometimes we'll do some off the beaten track type things too. But it all relates back to watercolor painting. We're strictly a watercolor channel here, so everything watercolor. And if you like this video too, please thumbs up. This way we can just keep a track of what you like so we can bring more content to you that you enjoy the most. And so we're going to get into this, and we'll just take a quick break. I'll start off, I'll use my rough paper here, Arches rough paper. It's the paper with the orange cover on it. So if you look up Arches paper, the one with the orange cover will be the one that is the rough paper for watercolor. And we'll get into this. We'll do some magic marker versus ink, which is a little more interesting. You can do a lot of these compositions, and then maybe you do your final painting after a few compositions with ink. So we'll get started in just a minute. We'll do this composition here with some markers, and we'll have fun and enjoy, and we'll be right back. All right, so we took a little break. Everyone, welcome again back. We took a break, 15-20 minutes, relax a little bit, have a cup of tea, cup of coffee. Maybe if we stand and we work, we can maybe sit down for a few minutes. If we're sitting down when we work with our artwork, then maybe we stand up and walk around a little bit and stretch our legs. And basically, breaks are always really good to do. I definitely always try to mention that on my videos here. And so I took a break, 15 minutes or so. And now we looked at this and we said this was our first preliminary sketch with our magic markers. We're doing an ink and wash, but we are using our magic markers. So we just have all of our permanent markers and waterproof markers. You know, the fancier ones, Faber-Castell and Statler, and then your more Sharpies you can get at any store, anywhere, locally. This one might have to, this larger Sharpies like this with the really wide point. These might be, you have to maybe order them online, or they do have them at art stores and things like that. So like any kind of hobby and craft stores would have these larger style Sharpies. So that's pretty much all you need. And an office pencil too, I use to shade in some of the middle tonal values. So you can use that too as well to just remind yourself when you're going to paint this that you're going to make this somewhat of a middle tonal value. You're not going to want to go too dark or too light. You want to kind of have it a middle value. And the same over here on the side of this country house or barn. And this we're going to leave white. Or very light anyway, very light tonal value. Sunlight's coming from here across the picture. It's behind the tree. There might be a shadow over here you can put in if you want where the tree is. So that we would probably fill in. It's going to be pretty dark, a shadow of that tree. So we could do this. We could go across with a shadow. Again, I'm just using the bigger, larger Sharpie. And just a shadow across there, like that. And then, of course, these would have shadows too. And so there, if you want, you can have a interesting shadow pattern on the ground. Looks really good. And we'll get started. We're going to shift over to our watercolor paper. We did, again, we just did our sketch. So we had a little bit of a plan of action going into this. And then we just take some tape, some of that drafting tape I like to use. We just put it down on onto our paper, our good watercolor paper. This gives us a nice finish edge, so we can, when we're done with our watercolor ink and wash, we can peel up the tape and we'll see a really nice finished edge. It gives it a real professional look. And okay, perfect. And let's and we'll remember we want to keep in mind our sunlight, so let's make our insignia up top. the sunlight's coming from here. If you want to use sunlight, you can use a sunlight insignia like that. And we're going to try to, as we looked at our preliminary sketch that we did, our tonal value sketch, we're looking at about halfway. If we're looking at this on a scale like this, halfway point is the rooftop approximately of our barn or our country house here, country cottage. And that's all the information we really need. And maybe also to the halfway point, maybe the halfway point here is where the cottage starts. So basically this is an L shape. That always looks good in paintings and drawings, L's. So this is a reverse L. And so the tree's over on this side, and then we go this way to the left, and then we have the sky over here. And we'll just keep that real simple. We won't make any clouds or anything. We'll just leave that very simple. And that's about it. So we'll do the halfway point here. So it's the halfway point there, and then we have the halfway point here. And that gives us our 2 points we just have to keep in mind, and that's really all we have to worry about. And we could also say, too, that this barn is, or house is, country house here, is approximately about half of this section. We'll make it a little smaller than I did here. Okay, so we have a plan of action, and we have our points laid out on our tape. So we'll do very light lines like this, and then we'll say, okay, so this is our trees over here. And then we're going to do and we can even, you can always adjust things. If you're looking at it and you're saying, you know what, I think I want to make the barn or the house here, this barn or house here we have in the countryside landscape, if you want to make it a little lower, that might look a little better. So instead of maybe halfway, maybe it's a little lower than halfway. So you can change right in the middle of things. These are just little hash marks for you to kind of have a general idea of the layout of your composition, of your painting. So as I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about it, I want to make this a little lower. So I'll make this this house, this barn house, a little lower, like that. And I'm going to do a light pencil drawing, like this. And then there's going to be some bushes and trees and things. And then there's going to be we're going to have a little communications pole, a little telephone pole here, and then some lines going this way. Maybe another one over here. And then we're going to have the trees and bushes over here. And that looks pretty good. That's about all we need. And we can also just do a few. I'll do a window here, or maybe a door here. We'll keep those the same height across, like that. And maybe another door over here. We can make this a window. And maybe a chimney on here. And that's about it. Okay, so we've got our light pencil sketch just to sketch things in, so that when we start in with our markers, Again, we're doing an ink and wash, but we are going to use some magic markers this time. Works just as effective, especially when you're going to do compositions and you don't want to necessarily break out your inks every time. You want to do some just preliminary sketches in your sketchbook or just on some paper. You can use just regular office printer paper and use some of the our pencils and pens. It works great. So let's start with our darks. So we're going to use our large Sharpie permanent marker, and we'll just get in some darks. And here we're just going to have fun. We're just going to take our marker, and then if you feel like when you're doing some working out of ideas as you're going, you can always stop and ask yourself a few questions and say, well, okay, I'm doing some of these darks here, and there's a big couple groupings of trees over here on the right side. Again, we're looking at we have this set up across from us. So once we do this preliminary sketch, we'll set this up across from us in our studio or on our table, wherever we work. We put this across, and we use that as our guide, but we can adjust it if we want. So I might say, you know what, I need to do more, maybe the trees and bushes need to maybe angle this way a little bit out more to give us the feeling of an angle going into the painting. We could just go straight across with our trees and bushes over here, but if we slowly angle it this way, it gives us a feel of flowing into the painting. So let's try that idea. It's going to be a little better than what we have. There are shadows here from the trees, so maybe we can say, well, we really don't have to worry about that too much now, but it still is something to keep in mind. So I'll do that. I'll some angles this way. Then as I get up a little higher here, I'm going to start making my branch shapes. And then some darks. So I always say, you know, do some more finer branches and then go in and do some heavier darks and just fire them in there. Don't worry about having to be perfect. It's shadows over on this side of the tree. Blocks of shadow. Think of it as blocks of shadow. Not so important that you're having to do everything perfect. You just block in some dark. So here I took my time. I did a little thicker tree trunk here going up. Then just some free fun blocking in some shadows. Then maybe over here another tree, darker, thicker tree trunk here. And another one here. And then the same thing, fire in some darks, shadow over here. No big deal, just have some fun, fire in some. So most of it, you're just having fun firing in some large blocks of darks, which are shadows. And then once in a while, slow down and do a couple little details like that. That's all you really need to do. And then here, another large tree trunk shape here. Like that. And then some finer lines, and then we can grab one of our medium Sharpies and do some finer lines here, like so. And there's some sunlight coming through here and through here too, so we have an interesting shadow and sunlight feel to this. And then some more blocking in some darks, a couple smaller and a nice balance with a few little smaller fine details. Then we can even go in with a finer marker, our waterproof markers. We'll get one, an even finer one, and we can get those really interesting, super fine, sharp details just in a few locations here and there. Kind of just to tantalize the senses as you're looking at this painting and this composition. You know, large blocks of darks and then some medium size limbs and tree trunks, and then you have some really fine details here and there too. Kind of a balance of all of those. Okay, and now we'll, again, sunlight coming from this way. We have our darks blocked in. Shadows going across. There we go. Just quick shadows like that. Just fire them in. They're thinner over here, and then they get a little wider as they go out. And that is, I think, just all we need like that. Just a few indications of shadow, and then some shadowing here too, where these bushes are over here, like that. And that should be fine. Then, now is probably a good time for a break. We've done a lot of work here on our shadows on the right side. We did all of our, from our preliminary sketch, we did our darkest dark tonal values over here on the right side. We're making our L shape, which always looks great in a painting or composition, an L. It's a reverse L. And we got our major, blocked in our major darks, and then as well as blocked in our major darker shadows with our black magic marker. And then we got in some fine lines for our branches and finer twigs in our trees and in our bush areas over here. We'll take a break now, and then we'll come back and we'll work on our cottage and house here. And some communication lines over here, and some fine grasses and little twigs and things in the foreground, and we should be good. And then we can get in some color, some watercolor wash on this. Okay, we just took a break. Again, I always mention take breaks, enjoy, stretch. You know, too much attention on something, you know, for a long period of time, it tends to be a stressor. And I always know myself, I always do much better if I take breaks. I think everyone's the same. Certain people, you can go more time. You don't need as many breaks. Some people, you might need breaks every 5-10 minutes or 10-15 minutes. Some people, you might be able to work a half an hour or so, or maybe 40 minutes, and then you would need a break. It all depends on your personality, but I would say it's always good and safe to, you know, say around every 15-20 minutes is a good time to take a break or so. You know, you feel it out. You're the artist. You can make that call, and we'll get back into it here. So we have, again, we're working from our original sketch, and we're just using this layout, this composition, and we're transferring it onto our Arches rough paper, because this is going to be a watercolor ink and wash. And we've blocked in some really nice darks here. We mixed up our shapes and shadow shapes. So we used the thick black magic marker to block in our darks here. And then we took our time a little more to do some medium-size tree trunks. And then we used some of our finer Sharpies and Faber-Castell and Statler markers, permanent markers, which are waterproof, to do some of the finer details. So as long as we have a mixture of large blocks of color, darks, medium, and small, fine markings, we're going to be fine. It's going to look really good, really pleasing, and then we're all set. I'll take my Sharpie again, and we'll finish up our darks here. So we're going to do our windows here. This is more or less the shadow side of our country house, and we have weeds and branches and all kinds of interesting things happening like that. And we're going to fill this in with beautiful watercolor paint. And we have a door over here. That's in sunlight. This would be in shadow, this side. We're remembering that the sunlight's coming from this direction. And So the light is coming, it's filtering through the trees over here, giving us these shadows. And then on this side of the house, it's pretty much mostly in sunlight. And this side of the house, the left side of the house, is in shadow. And this side of the house here, this wall here is in light, the sunlight. And then this portion of the roof underneath the eaves here is in shadow, so we're going to make a dark shadow there. And we could do another maybe window up there. This is our chimney. That's in shadow for the most part. And then the other side is and we have underneath the eaves on this side, I'm going to go with a little bit of a larger Sharpie here. This is the medium. And we'll put shadows under this here. Like that. Now we remember over here, this is something, sometimes fine details can cause us problems when we're doing our shadows. So we can kind of see how the roof goes over and across, and it extends beyond this wall over here, the actual house itself. So in this case, the shadow is going to stop on the wall right here. And there might be a little shadow under there, but that's it. That's a big key. If we were to go all the way across with a shadow beyond this wall here, that would look, that would maybe cause us a problem. It wouldn't look so great. So we just remember those small details sometimes can really be helpful to remember, to try to capture those type details. And if you're using your preliminary sketch like this, we didn't kind of capture that too well on here because we were doing more of a faster composition here to get our ideas down. But once you start going in and you're doing your final painting on good watercolor paper, let's say you're going to do a finished painting, that's why it's always good we take breaks, we slow down, we look at things, try to analyze things, and that's something that is really important there. That type of a detail can cause a big problem with the look of the house itself here in the beautiful countryside we're doing. So, okay, the house looks pretty good. We're going to do this communications pole up here, like that, quick. Some dots there, like that, perfect. And then like that. Okay, so we do our communications poles here, nice and quick. No need to get too fussy, just a straight line and then a cross on top with some supports underneath it. And then we can do our communication lines. We might do a little thicker line over here, like this. Then we can take our thinner point and sort of extend that a little bit, like that. Sometimes it's probably better just to use one, maybe just this one here, like the finer point. Like that, and then over here we would see the lines too, like that. That's pretty good. Okay, we're ready for paint. And we'll get our brushes. I'm going to use just two brushes. More of a larger and a smaller round point brush. These are Da Vinci Maestro travel brushes. Kolinsky Sable hairs. And some fresh water. And that's all we need. And we have our paints all ready to go here. And we'll just spritz our paints a little bit with the spritzer bottle, just to keep them a little moist. And then this is the fun part. Since we blocked in our darks with these beautiful dark shadow colors, the rest of the work is really simple. You use your favorite colors you want to use for this type of painting. You can do different color combinations and color schemes if you want. I'm going to go with just my usual favorites that I like to use for the, paintings like this. Use like cerulean blue for the sky, maybe mix in some raw sienna with that. So plenty of fresh moist paint. So that's our sky color, some cerulean blue, maybe some raw umber, just to mix in there a little bit to give it a little interesting feel. And let's just fire this right in. Fresh clean water and a little bit of French ultramarine blue maybe in the up here. So we'll make it a little darker up here in the corner. And then as we get lower, we use a little more water. And then just bring it on down to the, put some up in here. Now these are the tree area. Let's keep working our sky color down. We can bring that right down. We would leave this white paper though. So let's remember to keep this side of the house with some white paper here, because we remember the light's coming this way and it's shining right on this wall here of this house. This side is in shadow. So we remember that. And we do a little orange maybe, just to along the lower section. Just a little bit of orange, cadmium orange, just a little bit, not much. That's all. Then let's go with some greens. Greens, we have to do greens over here. Let's go with sap green. We'll mix that right there. Green, sap green, raw umber. A little bit of burnt umber in there. Cerulean blue. And just a little hit and miss here and there. It doesn't have to be, let's not block in the whole thing. Let's leave some white paper in there. And maybe some yellow ochre too. Give it some splashes here. Again, let's leave some white paper. And some olive green maybe over here. Some splashes. We're leaving white paper. Let's leave white paper here, and even in this area where there's shadows. Now that there's shadows over here, let's do some purple and blue. Purple and blue. The shadow colors. And we'll mix those over the top. We'll mix them in with the greens and golds, some purple for the shadowing. And we're going to do the same thing here. Let's use yellow ochre, raw umber. For our field here. Raw umber. So now let's remember this when we're going to, for the most part, this is going to be a gold color here. Let's remember, let's use all of our gold colors, our yellows, in this mix so that we'll use some cadmium lemon yellow. We'll use some cadmium yellow. And what this does is it makes it look really interesting versus just taking one of our yellows, like a yellow ochre, and just going across with just yellow ochre. Let's make it more exciting by using very similar warm colors in this section. And maybe some green too. Let's put in a little bit of green there. We could also use some blue so that the sky color reflects down into the ground area. A little spot here and there of cerulean blue in this ground area will make a big difference. It'll sort of tie the whole painting together versus just doing all blue up here and then not putting any of that blue in the rest of the painting. Same thing with the purple. The purple is going to, some of the cool colors down here as well. And just like that, blue and the purples for the shadowing. And we're looking great. Let's burnt sienna for the roof and maybe some yellow ochre. Straight into the paint. Straight into the fresh, moist, squeezed paint from the tube. And mix it around. Add a little cerulean blue to that from the sky, kind of getting in there a little bit. And then we'll mix it just a little bit here and there. It's on the shadow side. And then the side of the building, maybe we'll use some yellow ochre over here. Just a light wash of yellow ochre on this side of the building, on the house. We could add in some of that burnt sienna as well into that. And we left this white paper. We could also just do a very light touch of some cadmium lemon yellow. And that's and that gives us a really pleasing look. We've used our ink and wash method, although this time we're going to use just our Sharpie markers and a few of our other fine point markers. Staedtler and Faber-Castell have great fine point permanent pens with the black ink. And then we just basically, once we were completed with that and it dried, which the ink markers dry extremely fast, we went over with our wash, our watercolor wash. And we have a very pleasing look here. We can always do some touch-ups, so I'm just blending in some of the areas that sort of started to mix and mingle. You can just blend some things around. It doesn't have to be perfect. Boundaries can overlap. I'll do a little bit of a chimney color here, like that. And that's really, you know, you can always add a few things if you think something needs a little touching up. I see over here, this could be a little better, like that. Maybe some small ceramic isolators up on top of the communication poles. And that's about it. This is really a nice, pleasing composition. We can remove our tape. We'll see how it looks. I think you'll really be happy with this type of a composition and painting. The markers are fun to work with. You can practice a lot with the markers by sketching out ideas beforehand, so you really have a really solid plan going into doing your painting. You can choose all kinds of subject matter. We just happen to do a nice country scene here with some nice trees and things. You can add more things to it. You can even go in and, if you think something needs a little touching up, you can even go in and use some ivory black paint and Payne's gray and maybe a little more umber mixed in there. And maybe here there can be some more, there's probably a shadow I didn't have in here that we need. Let's do that. Purple, cerulean blue, purple. Here in the house. So we're just a little shadow for the house over here. And we can add that darker dark along here. And that should be good. And we'll zoom in and kind of take a better, closer look at this. All right, so that's it. We zoomed in here a little bit just so you can kind of see a little closer detail on the way the magic marker looks versus ink, let's say. Ink might be a little different looking. It might be a little smoother. We're using rough paper, so that rough paper does give us a little more interesting effects of kind of that rough look to things, more texture. So this is really a good effect with textures, as well as our colors. We use lots of really beautiful color here in this painting. And I hope you'll try this. It's a lot of fun, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.